Yeah, I will be sharing now my screen so we can get straight into our subject for today. Just a second. Okay, share. Okay. I think by now, yeah, you should see my perfect, Jackie. Thank you for the confirmation. So yes, thank you very much for joining this session on how to recognize stress behaviors and what you can do about it. I am Magda Tabak, and I am really happy to see that the subject caught your attention. As I was saying, it's a very dear subject to me and a very important topic. Given the short time that we have today, I would like to ask you to use the chat if you have any questions, and I do hope you will have questions. And please write those questions in capital letters, so they'll be very easy for me or for Jackie to spot. If you have general questions, put them there. If you have a question about something that I'm talking and you need to clarify, it will help you to clarify so you can understand the concepts I'm discussing, then yes, please, you can unmute yourself and ask it directly. Okay. Also, please now allow me to introduce myself. I have actually spent most of my professional life working in consultancy or in large corporations, and mainly in roles that ranged from consultant, strategy analyst, project manager, team manager. And one of the companies I loved to work for was Vodafone Romania. I actually moved here in the UK by joining Vodafone Group, and that was a very nice experience. But during my time in Vodafone Romania, for almost 6 years, I have been a volunteer trainer for an internal program that was focusing on organizational culture, communication, teamwork, and customer experience. And that meant I was delivering at least 1 or 2 full days of training a month, and I really loved it. So after changing countries, and I moved to London, UK, and jobs and companies twice. And after a year that led to me burning out in a role that I really did not enjoy, that was not with Vodafone, it was with another company, I have actually decided to make a career change and go towards the area that I know that I liked the most and which I felt it gave me a lot more fulfillment, and that was training. And my focus as a trainer and my personal why is to help people lead better lives through better self-awareness, better communication, and improved stress management. And I do that mainly through delivering process communication model and applied neuroscience workshops and trainings. And because I've mentioned process communication model, or PCM, this is the tool that I will be using for our webinar today. I was first introduced to PCM during my times in Vodafone Romania when I was working as a project manager in employee engagement. And really, it was, I think, the only tool that really stayed with me and from which I could still apply concepts in my day-to-day life, even 2 years after the workshop. So after I moved to the UK, I got certified here. Here is one of the 4 master trainers in the world. And since then, I have been delivering the workshops to companies and individuals here in the UK, in Romania, and other European countries. And I'd be curious to know, how many of you know or have ever heard about process communication model? Can you please write that in the chat? And if you did, in what context? So I'll give you a few moments to write that in the chat. Yes, Jackie knows because I told her several times about it. Never heard. Yeah, that's what I'm actually expecting. Yeah. Yeah, never heard. Yeah. Yeah, this is actually what I'm expecting. What I was expecting. It would have been a surprise to hear somebody saying, yes, I've heard about PCM. So it's confirming my, what I thought. Well, you're in the right place to hear for the first time about PCM, and I'm really happy to share it with you. And I do hope it's going to bring you value and information that you can use already starting today in your day-to-day life. Good. So now that I've shared a few things about myself, let me tell you a few words about the content of our webinar today. So I have quite a lot planned for you today. And what I also want to tell you, if you can grab a piece of paper and a pen, it might be useful, because I'll want you to also analyze a bit yourself from the perspective of PCM, so that you can better apply what I will talk about today. So what I want to focus on today, first, I will introduce to you PCM. As we've seen, nobody knows about it. So I want to give you a bit of a background. Then I will tell you about how PCM sees the personality structure and the personality types. Then I will offer a short introduction to the neuroscience of stress. So we are entering into the meaty subject of today, of how to recognize stress and what we can do about it. Then we're going to focus exactly how can we recognize stress. And according to PCM, there are 6 failure mechanisms or distress behaviors. And we're going to find out what are these 6 behaviors. And then what can we do about it? And we're going to learn the concept of psychological needs. Then I will offer you 2 examples, one from the professional sphere and the other one from the personal one. And then we'll make some time for questions and answers. Okay, so let me introduce you to process communication model. So PCM originated from a clinical model developed by Dr. Taby Keller called the miniscript. Dr. Keller is an internationally recognized clinical psychologist whose work is normally focused on the how of communication between people. And his research has been successfully applied by his colleagues, therapists, who, by using his research, so the miniscript, were able to reduce treatment time with patients. And there have been some of his colleagues who managed to reduce treatment time by 30%, which can mean years of treatment in some cases. And this is why in 1977, Dr. Keller actually received the Eric Berne Memorial Scientific Award for the most important scientific discovery that year in his field of psychology, transactional analysis. It was his field of psychology, and I'm sure that many of you are familiar with transactional analysis. Well, the story becomes even more interesting in 1978, when NASA, actually, Dr. Terry Maguire, the lead psychiatrist for manned space flights at NASA, got interested in the model and started using it for recruitment, for planning teams, training in communication, and in stress management. And NASA actually got involved in the validation of all PCM concepts and in translating these concepts into behavioral terms, meaning if we observe these behaviors, we know what to do. As a result of his work with NASA and the Berne Award, Dr. Taby Keller was invited to speak all over the world. And this is how directors and CEOs of companies saw the value in the concept as a management tool and asked him to actually translate the concepts into management terms. And this is how process communication model was born, because initially it was process therapy model, because it had clinical beginnings. And one last interesting element, in 1984, Taby actually gave a private 3-day PCM seminar to Bill and Hillary Clinton and to their select participants. And later on, Taby became friends with the Clintons and served as a communication advisor to Bill. So once Bill Clinton was elected president, the whole White House was trained in PCM. Okay, now that I've introduced you a bit to the origins of the model, I will present you 2 of the most important concepts in this behavioral personality tool. And these are the PCM personality structure and the 6 personality types. So let's look a bit how PCM presents the personality structure. In PCM, we use the metaphor of a condominium, a house, with 6 floors to explain the structure of our personality. And these 6 personality types in our personality structure are similar, yeah, to the floors in a house. And each of us, each person has all these 6 personality types in our house, in our condominium. And each of these personality types comes with a certain view of the world, yeah, a certain perception. And there are 2 particular floors that are of the highest importance in our lives at any one time. So out of these 6, 2 of them are very important for us at any time. One of them is fixed, one of them can be mobile. The first one is our foundation, or the base personality type. With this one, we are born, or it can be formed in the first months of life. Once this base personality type is established, it will remain the same all our lives. In other words, no matter which is our base personality type, we will always show stronger the characteristics and behaviors of that typology. Yeah, the first floor, the foundation. The base personality type defines our primary perceptions, so how we view the world and how we express ourselves. The currency we use, meaning the focus in communication. What do we focus when we communicate? Then the character strengths. What are our character strengths? The natural strengths that we have and we use very, very easily in our day-to-day life. Then the personality parts, for those familiar with transactional analysis might recognize what that is, but I also call them methods of communication. So what are the words, the tones, gestures, postures, facial expressions that we use when we communicate? Yeah, so those are the personality parts. And also the base personality type defines our preferred management style. So as we can see, the base personality type is very important for us, and it stays with us our whole life. It defines many important elements. Because each of us has its own personality house, personality condominium, made out of all the 6 personality types in different orders and intensities, we all show characteristics of these other floors. If we listen to the strongest perception, the most evident of a person, which translates many times in the language they prefer to speak, this will indicate the base personality. And this is why when we talk about a subject that is very important for us, we choose to situate ourselves, to position ourselves on the first floor of our profile, meaning at the base personality. Let me introduce you to another concept that is important in PCM, the elevator. Our elevator can take us to any and all of the floors. And fortunately, our elevators can go all the way up to the 6th floor. And as I said earlier, on each floor, we have a different personality type and a measured amount of energy that we can use to stay there, experiencing the world as a function of that personality type. So through the perceptions, the currencies, the strengths, the personality parts, and the management style that personality type prefers. And I'm saying always, the intensity of a certain floor. This means how much is colored of that floor. As we can see, the base is colored, it's fully colored, and then the other floors are less and less colored. This intensity can vary from a person to another, and also in the same person can vary in different periods of their lives, depending how much they developed those characteristics, because that's the good part. I mean, as we all know, we can develop characteristics that are maybe not as easy for us or natural for us. Well, now I'm going to introduce the second very important floor or personality type for us, and this is the phase personality type. And this is very much related with our subject today, the stress management, yeah, the behaviors under stress. The phase personality type defines our most important psychological needs. So I think there it misses the word needs. So the most important psychological needs and our distress sequence, meaning how we behave under stress. So this is what the phase personality is defining. The interesting thing here is that the phase personality can change in time, in certain situations, not for everybody. And thus, this leads to changes in our most important psychological needs and in our distress sequence. So how we react under stress. And when we are born, so at the beginning of our life, our base personality equals our phase. And if we go through those certain situations and we phase, we will always phase one floor up, as here. Yeah, so if before, oops, sorry, that's the, so if before the base was, in this case, on the first floor, thinker, later on, it goes to the second floor. If we phase again, it goes to the third floor. It's always one floor up. So as I was saying, we have two main floors that are important for us in all our life. The base, which always stays the same, it's at the base of our condominium, and the phase, which can change in time. And the phase defines our psychological needs in that phase of our life and how we behave under stress. To sum up a bit, some of the information regarding the personality structure, because this is the base for our learning today. The foundation or base personality type develops at birth or within the first few months, and it does not change throughout our life. The order of the floors, 2 through 6, is set by age 7, and our personality order does not change throughout life. So after the age of 7, it will not change. We all have the structural characteristics of all the other 5 personality type, and this is measurable. Actually, when people who take the personality questionnaire, they get one of these very short profiles. This is 2 pages, and a bigger one, a longer one that is up to 40 pages. And on the back, you actually have scores for each of them. And these scores translate into how much of the floors you have covered. Yeah, so you can have, this is my profile. You can have quite a lot of energy on some floors, but just a little bit of energy on others. And that's why we say it's measurable. Our elevator can take us from floor to floor, allowing us access to that personality type experiences, so that we can experience the perceptions and behaviors of that personality type. And one thing that is important to know is that only positive behaviors are experienced and manifested in our condominium floors. When we are under stress, we go below. Yeah. And one thing that I forgot to say, you see here the 4,320 number. This is how many combinations, potential combinations of personality types there are. Yeah. This taking into consideration all 6 floors and personality types plus the phase. So we say many times that all these personality models, they put you in boxes. This one does the same, but there are 4,320 boxes, and then you also have different energies on every floor. So we are different, just to put it shortly. Okay, let me finally introduce to you. Yeah, that's a lot of boxes. I agree. I'm okay with 4,320 boxes. Let me finally introduce to you the 6 distinct personality types, and to each their own. They all come with their good parts, with the not so good parts. And one thing that TCM really teaches us, we are all good. We are all okay. At times we might have behaviors that are not okay, and we're going to find out about that when we talk about stress, but we are all okay. We all bring something to the table that it's important and relevant. And I'll invite you now to think, where do you recognize yourself? So from this slide and the next one, please listen carefully what I say about every personality type. This is going to refer more to our base personality type, and try to see where you think you are. Yeah, so pay attention to my description of each of the personality types and to the info on the next slide, and then I'll be curious to see which personality type you think it describes you the best. Okay, so let's start. Thinkers. They are the natural planners. They are responsible, logical, and organized. They want to know the facts, the ratios, the risk estimates, the data maps, the strategy, the analysis, how the logic, how did we get to that conclusion? They like to analyze and to make plans, and they crave control. So they really struggle in environments with high uncertainty and a rapidly changing landscape. What they bring to the table is organization and planning. Persisters, they are the natural protectors. They are dedicated, observant, and conscientious. They want to know the meaning, the purpose, the impact of what's going on. And they crave consistency and security. So they struggle when the people and organization that they care about are facing danger. What they bring to the table is keeping an eye on the big picture. Harmonizers, they are the natural caregivers. They are compassionate, sensitive, and warm. They want to nurture relationships and connections and make sure everyone is okay. They crave emotional connection, so they struggle when relationships are under strain or when people feel the pain of uncertainty, of crisis, of shocks. What they bring to the table is their ability to nurture others, and also sometimes, or most of the times, they function like the glue that ties a team together. Imaginers, they are the natural dreamers. They are imaginative, reflective, and calm, and they want to reflect and exercise their imaginative capabilities. They crave time and space without interruptions so that they can recharge. So they really struggle when they need to face increased social interactions. What they bring to the table is their ability to keep calm and imagine the possibilities. Rebels, they are the natural funsters. They are spontaneous, creative, and playful. They want to express themselves freely and engage creatively with the world. They crave unstructured time to be creative, so they really struggle with any limitations that they are placed on their environment or the way they work. What they bring to the table is their ability to keep things from getting too serious and gloomy. That is besides their creativity. Promoters are the natural doers. They are adaptable, persuasive, and charming. They want to take action and seize opportunity, and they crave the excitement of challenge and risk, so they are open to embrace crisis and uncertainty, but they often lose sight of the emotional connections and the impact of such situations. What the promoters bring to the table is their ability to see opportunity and take decisive action. Now, let me zoom in on the character strengths of each of these personality types, because this is one very good way to recognize the base personality of people. So I'll invite you to try and see where you see yourself. Yeah, so the character strengths are our natural abilities, attributes, and personal qualities. They are things that come to us natural without any effort. So let's see, the thinker is responsible, logical, and organized. The persister is dedicated, observant, and conscientious. The harmonizer is compassionate, sensitive, and warm. The imaginer is imaginative, reflective, and calm. The rebel is spontaneous, creative, and playful. And the promoter is adaptable, persuasive, and charming. Now, please write in the chat box, which personality do you recognize yourself in the most? We will all have characteristics from all of them, but which one do you think it's most powerful in you? Persister, thinker, persister, thinker, persister, harmonizer, persister or harmonizer, yeah, thinker, harmonizer. Rebel, we have one rebel, Zoe. Thinker, persister, thinker, rebel. Okay, somewhere between thinker or persister with a good dash of imaginer. Rebel, persister of harmonizer. Great, yeah. So we have yeah, quite a diversity, and that is absolutely normal. And I can share with you that normally in the business environment, we have a lot of thinkers and persisters, and then harmonizers. These are the most common ones for the regular business environment. I myself am a harmonizer. As you can see, the orange here, my base is harmonizer. Persister, thinker, persister, harmonizer. Great. So you will see, I mean, I really like this exercise. For now, I only gave you, of course, we only have 1 hour time here, not enough to really recognize, but it's enough to give you a clue about the potential personality type that you have. I write a lot on my blog. I will give you at the end details about where you can find my articles. There are a lot of articles that I write about PCM, and if you read some of them, it might give you, it might help you to actually pinpoint what your base personality or the phase personality is. Good, thank you for joining me for this exercise. Now, remember, so this might be your base personality. We're going to look a bit later at the phase personality. Okay, now that I finished, finally, we established all the required background knowledge. We can now get back to the topic I want to talk to you about, which is stress. How do we recognize stress? What we can do about it? And I want to start this by offering you a very short introduction into the neuroscience of stress. This is not from PCM, yeah, but I think it's relevant to understand some basic elements of the neuroscience of stress so that we can better understand what happens when us or someone else enters in distress and starts to act unlike themselves. And who knows, by understanding a bit more about the neuroscience of stress, we may become a bit more forgiving, both with ourselves and with the other person, but also without feeling absolved of our responsibility towards our actions and behaviors when under stress. So let me start. The most well-known macro description of the brain anatomy is probably the triune brain theory. And this is a rather old description of the brain, since it was proposed by Paul MacLean in 1952. And of course, for the purpose of this very short introduction, is oversimplified, but it still holds some truth, and it helps us to understand the main functions of the brain at a very macro level. So from the point of view of what we need, it still keeps a high historical and didactical value. What the theory says is that the brain is composed out of 3 parts, corresponding to 3 different stages of evolution. First, we have the brainstem, yeah, the bottom part in my slide. And that is the most ancient part of the brain. And it's thought to have appeared around 300 million years ago. It is mostly responsible for maintaining body functions such as breathing and heart rate, responsible also for routing information up and down between the brain and the nervous system, and also responsible for some instinctive behaviors and for motor learning. It is often called the reptilian brain because that part of the brain is dominant in reptiles. But then again, this is not really 100% reflecting reality, because the reptiles also have structures equivalent to the limbic system and to the cortex to some extent. Now we move up to the limbic system. It evolved mostly in small mammals, and this is why MacLean called it the paleomammalian brain. And it is thought to have appeared around 200 to 250 million years ago. So also very, very old. And it is mostly responsible for the treatment of memory and emotions, as well as taking care of our primitive survival functions, feeding, reproduction, parenting, etc. Then we arrive at the cortex. This is the most recent part of the brain, and it is particularly large in primates and even more so in humans. It is thought to have evolved around 150,000 years ago. Therefore, it is much more recent than the other 2 parts of the brain. And just to put these numbers into perspective, if the brain history was 24 hours, that corresponds to around 45 seconds. So the cortex the age of the cortex corresponds to 45 seconds if the whole history of the brain was 24 hours. So that is very, very little. It means it's still very new and not so efficient. But however, the cortex is responsible for all the complex functions of the brain, including perception, planning, attention, abstract thinking, language, empathy, etc., etc. And I just want to repeat that this division should be considered as a historical approximation, sorry, and not necessarily as a currently scientific validated subdivision. And also on a scientific note, it is wrong to say that mammals evolved from reptiles. We can only say that they have a common ancestor somewhere in the past, some 100 million years ago, and that they evolved from that common ancestor. But nobody knows exactly how the brain of those common ancestors looked like. Okay, so now let me introduce to you a metaphor that we use in order to simplify the conversation about the brain. So the metaphor of the rider and the elephant, the cortex is the rider and the limbic system and the reptilian brain, so the old part of the brain, we call the elephant or the unconscious brain, and the cortex being the conscious brain. The metaphor of the rider and the elephant has been first coined by the University of Virginia psychologist Jonathan Haidt in his book, The Happiness Hypothesis, which I actually recommend. So how does it go with this metaphor? The oldest two structures, so the elephant, are old and very powerful. The elephant doesn't use words, it doesn't have any verbal function, and is concerned with survival. Then about 150,000 years ago, so very recently in terms of evolution, the rider, the cortex, or in particular the prefrontal cortex, this part here, was formed. The conscious brain has a lot of new function, yeah? So the rider has a lot of new function. It can now use words, language, can time travel because it can remember the past and anticipate the future. It also has superior functions, like planning, creativity, problem solving. The biggest problem is that the rider can function only when the elephant is calm. This is why many times, even if we have very good plans for, I don't know, let's say organizational change, if we don't engage the elephant of the teams and not just their conscious brain, the rider, things will not happen as desired. Because if the elephant is not in, then the rider cannot lead the elephant anywhere. There are many differences between the two brains, but I will mention four important ones. One, the rider solves complex problems, while the elephant solves very simple problems. The rider is flexible and open to novelty. Yeah, it's the part of the brain saying, how about trying to solve this in a different manner? What about this new option? The elephant, on the other side, it's more rigid. If I have a belief that served me for years, kept me alive, yeah, for years, and then the elephant memorized it, and the tendency that the elephant has, it will be to always apply it in similar context. And it takes a lot of effort and awareness from the rider to change that. And the elephant learns to repetition and association. But in order to change something that the elephant has learned in the past, it takes a lot of repetition and association with the new behavior. Another important difference, the rider is focused on positive information. He wants us to be well, to develop, to try new things. The elephant is focused on negative information. It wants us not to be bad. It's focused on survival and security, because this is how the human race managed to evolve in so many years, because it was safe, it survived. The last difference, the rider gets tired as it uses a lot of energy, whereas the elephant can go on for a long time. It's like a new model of, I know, of a very techy gadget. It's still in its beta form. It's at the beginning. It uses a lot of energy. Still needs to be improved. It's a lot more developed than the older version, but yeah, it has a downside. And the downside for the rider is that it gets tired very fast. This is why if we think of, I know, our normal work life. If we spend an intense day of workshop on defining the business strategy for our department, for example, we might feel very tired compared to I don't know, a Saturday where we spend it with our family and friends. Yeah, because in the first situation, we put our rider to work, so it got tired. Well, when both the rider and the elephant work in sync, life is good. But when the rider is tired or the elephant is triggered by strong emotions, the elephant takes over, and it's very hard for the rider to get back in control. So what does this metaphor and advice boils down to? Most of us spend most of our time trying to persuade other people's riders. Yeah, we give them, I know, the 7 reasons why my opinion is better than yours, or why you should see things my way, when in fact, the way to persuade people is to speak to their elephant first. And because the elephant is a lot stronger than the rider, if you get somebody feeling the truth of what you are saying and feeling like they like you, so their elephant likes you, then it will want to go in your direction. And then it's effortless to persuade the rider to go along, because if the elephant is convinced, it will take the rider there. But if the elephant is digging in its heels and doesn't want to go, doesn't want to be dragged along by our conclusions and what we want to sell to the elephant, then there is really nothing you can say that will persuade the rider. And this is why every time we try to, we have a discourse or an initiative for change, it will really work better if we take into account the fact that we are mostly elephants. Exactly. So the top tip is speak to the elephant first. We are mostly elephants. And this is why I find this metaphor very useful in explaining what is happening under stress. The elephant takes over and throws off the rider. This is what is happening when we are stressed. But let's look in a bit more detail at the hijack of the cortex, or in other words, when the elephant is frightened and throws off the rider. So when the elephant feels safe, it leaves the rider to guide and use its super abilities. When there is a threat around, the elephant fulfills its biological mission. It helps us survive. How? Just as it has trained for hundreds of millions of years. It starts the fight, flight, and freeze reaction and helps us either fight the threat fight it, or run from it, or freeze and hope that it goes away. And most of the biggest communication and relationship problems appear when one of us says or does something that frightens the elephant of the other person. The second person's elephant confuses the social threat with life-threatening situations, and it acts in as they learned for 300 millions of years. So, for example, this can happen during a feedback session with a colleague, when the colleague tells us that we did something wrong, and we become defensive, and we stop listening to her. And while she speaks, we are already preparing our arguments to combat her points. Or we might simply disengage from the conversation and withdraw inside ourselves, and we are not open to interaction and to whatever she says. Or we simply start to feel blocked and it's hard to focus. Yeah, so we have the fight, flight, or freeze. This is why our most important stake when communicating, and this is based on rigorous neuroscience, is to maintain the elephant of the other person calm. Once it gets scared, emotional hijacking appears, and all our efforts of giving feedback, influencing, or convincing become useless, because we'll be carrying out the rest of the conversation with a brain structure that was trained for hundreds of millions of years to survive and not to discuss or collaborate. Yeah, so another important thing about the emotional hijacking is that in a state of emotional hijacking, we lose up to 75% of our cognitive capacities, of what our prefrontal cortex can do. So we are not really ourselves when we are stressed, and even less so when we are very, very stressed and for long periods of time. And this is why I'm saying that knowing a little bit more about how our brain works under stress, it can help us to be a bit more forgiving to ourselves and to others, but without taking the responsibility of our actually doing the right things, but just giving us time to get out of stress or doing things that help us to get out of stress. And yes, I see from Luis that sounds similar to the chimp paradox. Yeah, it covers yeah, similar grounds indeed. Thank you, Luis. Okay, so now that I covered the area of the neuroscience of stress, which I think, I mean, it's just really basic, but I think it's very important to give us a flavor of what is happening inside our head when we are stressed and why we are not the same when we are under stress. Let me now get back to PCM and to look at what PCM teaches us about our behaviors under stress. Yeah, I will introduce to you the 6 failure mechanisms, as Tabby Keller has called them, meaning distress behaviors, or as I like to call them, the 6 ways a stress elephant can look like. So let's see. So in large part, due to this emotional hijacking, the elephant taking over, when we are stressed, we tend to behave in ways that we ourselves, and of course others, might not like. We are still okay, but we exhibit behaviors that are not okay. And according to Tabby Keller studies, depending on our phase personality type, so now I talk about the phase personality type, we tend to have one of these 6 behavioral patterns. Yeah, he called them failure mechanisms. And as a thinker phase, and now I will invite you again to think and see, where do you recognize yourself more? As a thinker phase, we might have a tendency to over control. As a persister phase, we might have a tendency to push beliefs, yeah, to try to convince others of our convictions. As a harmonizer, we might tend to make silly mistakes that otherwise we wouldn't do. So simple things that normally are not a problem for us when we are stressed, yeah, we're going to do those things wrong. As imaginer phase, we might passively await. We just feel that we don't have enough indications and directions on how to do things, and just we'll start just waiting. As a rebel phase, we might start to blame others. It's not that other personality types, phase personality, don't blame others, but with the rebel, they are always blameless. It's never them. As a promoter phase, we might start to manipulate others. Yeah, so this is actually one of the areas that I love the most in PCM, the distress behaviors and what we can do about them. There are many other smaller behavioral cues that can help us to recognize stress earlier. What I gave you here, the failure mechanism, are actually the second level of distress, but they are the most visible ones. But in the regular PCM workshop, I spent several hours discussing just the subject of stress and stress behaviors, but now we are only scratching the surface. But even like this, I do believe that it should be enough to give you a good sense of the distress behaviors that you see around you and also in yourself. So let's now think. Yeah, I will talk now about the specific triggers, and later on when I give you even more data. So remember which failure mechanism sounds the most, yeah, go-to mechanism for you. And with the information that will come in the next part, let's see if you can try to spot what your probable phase personality type is. Okay, so let's see now what are our specific triggers. Yeah, so what frightens the elephant? And I'm going to talk to you now about the psychological needs, yeah, or the 8 triggers of motivation and distress. But first, I want to say there are many things that can get us stressed, not only the 8 triggers of motivation and distress, yeah, the psychological needs that PCM teaches us about. There are several universal triggers that we all share, and I can give you now 2 examples, but there are many. If we think of the Maslow hierarchy of needs and see there are a few good triggers of stress there, you know, if things don't go well, for example, if we are ill or we don't have what to eat or drink, or and the roof above our heads, or if we live in a very insecure neighborhood, will have our buttons pushed negatively a lot, and this will lead us in stress. Or another model that I really like a lot, and that illustrates a number of 5 universal buttons that we all share. They are the 5 buttons of the elephant. This is the SCARF model, and I think many of you are familiarized with the model. Yeah, SCARF comes from status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. I found SCARF a really good model to explain many of our reactions, both positive and negative. And I wrote about how to positively push our SCARF buttons in the context of the COVID pandemic on my blog. So SCARF talks about the 5 universal buttons of the elephant, and when they are pushed negatively, we enter distress very quickly. But as I said, these are universal triggers. Yeah, all of us have this. We are all sensitive to this, no matter what our personality type is. But what I want to focus on today are individual specific triggers that we experience in certain phases of our lives. Yeah, because I said these are connected with our phase personality type, which can change in time. Yeah, I said the base personality was not changing in time. The phase can change at times in certain conditions. So the psychological needs, which are our specific triggers for motivation and distress, are innate motivational desires that must be met in us, in an individual, for effective and productive functioning. And these are like basic hungers that need satisfactions, and meeting our needs is like charging our batteries. And before we can deal effectively with others, we must first get our own psychological needs met. This ensures crisp, effective communication, avoiding miscommunication and unproductive interactions. And the interesting thing is that each personality type has a different psychological need. So, according to psychology research, when we do not get our psychological needs met positively, we attempt to get the very same needs met in a negative way. Yeah, this really wouldn't make sense, but we are interesting creatures, and it seems like our brain thinks that if we meet a need in a negative way, it's better than not meeting it at all. And this is usually outside of our conscious awareness, as these are mechanisms we have learned in early childhood, and they helped us in the past to cope with, I know, difficult situations, but which we really haven't revised them with our adult conscious mind, and they actually might not be so helpful today in our grown-up reality. But unless we examine ourselves and make a conscious long-term effort to change these negative behaviors, we cannot really influence them. They are so ingrained in us. Let me give you an example of how one can get their psychological needs met negatively. I'll just give it a simple example. Let's imagine a child who misses their mother's attention and the cuddles and ask for this. And mom is too busy and stressed to be able to dedicate the time right now because she needs to cook dinner, to still, I know, send the report from work, and I know to do the washing. So she tells the child to calm down, that she'll be with them later, but the child doesn't understand later and wants mommy now, so really starts to cry and make a scene and yell. And at the end of her wits, mom gets upset and starts to yell at the child. And this is how the need was met negatively. Yeah, if the child wanted attention from their mom, they got attention, but in a negative way because they got the yelling from mom. But as I said, for the brain, meeting a need negatively is better than not having it met at all. Well, there is a good part. This negative behavior that we show under stress is observable, repetitive, sequential, and predictable. We call it in PCM distress sequence. And different psychological needs unmet will lead to different distress sequences. This is why the PCM model can predict what a person is likely to do in distress. And this is why we can also know what we can do to help someone by observing how they behave under stress. Yeah. So if a certain psychological need that is not met, that is very important for me at a stage in my life, is not met, will make me react in a certain way under stress. And this is the key. And this is why NASA used the model for so many years, because it was showing them, okay, so if my astronaut during a mission reacts like this means that this psychological need is not met. Let me teach you how to do something about it. Let's see which are these needs. There are 8 psychological needs, each related with a certain phase personality. Yeah, so now these personality types to the right, they are the phase personality, yeah, not the base that we talked about earlier, is the phase. So let's see. For the thinker, they have time structure and recognition of work, yeah, thinker phase. For persister, we have recognition of work and conviction, recognition of convictions. I will talk a bit more in more detail about them in the next slides. For the harmonizer, recognition of person and sensory needs. For the imaginer, solitude. For the rebel, contact or playful contact. For the promoter, incidence. We'll see exactly what that means. So in the following slides, I will describe in a little bit more details these needs. And this is where I will ask you to try and see which of them do you resonate more with. And let me know in the chat afterwards, yeah? So let's see. Time structure. People with time structure needs, so the thinker phase, they want to know when things are due. And they like to plan for today, tomorrow, and next week, and even more if possible. Recognition of work. This is one need that is shared both by the thinker and the persister phase, but there is a nuance there. Why for the thinker it's important in a certain manner, for the persister in another manner. So let's see. They both want to hear good job, well done, great idea, great opinion. They are both goal-oriented, yeah, and they desire the confirmation that what they have done is noticed and appreciated. Now, for the thinker, for them it's more important that their work is appreciated for being smartly done, goal achieved in the parameters that were first planned according to the strategy and according to the plan. And of course, they are motivated by awards, bonuses, a pat on the back. This means that you've done a great job. For the persister, recognition of work translates into recognition of their strong commitment to and the belief, the conviction they have that, yeah, this was an important project, or I believe in our mission, I believe in our project, in our company. It's also recognition for their principled work and for the contribution that they have done. Yeah, so this is the nuance. It's for both of them is recognition of work, but with this nuance. Now let's see. The second psychological need of the persister phase, recognition of conviction. So conviction is about having a commitment to a belief, an opinion, or a judgment. Recognized, yeah, they want this to be valued and recognized. And many times they would rather be respected rather than liked. And they really like to have their needs,
you were in mute.
Yeah, somehow I managed to do that. What was the moment when I became when I muted myself? So should I repeat from what point, or I was talking about the recognition of the convictions for the persister phase? Okay.
Yeah, you can continue.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Zoom adventures. Okay, so they would rather be respected than liked, and they need to have their opinions sought frequently. Yeah, so for them it's very important to see that people value their opinion, and that doesn't necessarily mean that once their opinion has been asked, you need to actually do what they said. But it's enough to say, yeah, I understand where you're coming from and I appreciate your opinion. That is already good enough. Okay, let's see now the two psychological needs of the harmonizer phase. Recognition of person. They want to know that people like them and they are accepted unconditionally. And this is not linked with performance. This doesn't mean that harmonizer phase won't be amazing at work, but when you recognize them, they would like to be appreciated for the human being, not for the human doing. Yeah. And then the sensory need, specific to the harmonizer phase, they want to have an environment that pampers the senses. They appreciate sight, sound, smell, touch, taste, yeah, all the senses to be positively touched, yeah. And this is why the perfect home will be nest-like, yeah, with windows that look on the outdoors, cozy chairs, pleasant music, flowers, soft pastel colors. That if they can choose. If they cannot choose much, they will still do a little thing, you know, like at the office, they will bring a small plant and maybe a photo of their family or their dear ones. So there are ways that they can cover that need. It doesn't have to be in the whole environment. Yeah, so this is for the harmonizer phase needs. Okay, let's see now when my slides will decide to help. Yes, solitude. This is the need for the imaginer phase. They want to be alone, want their own private time and their own private space, and they are experienced as being withdrawn. The rebel phase, playful contact. They want to have fun. They like loud music, mechanical toys, strobe lights, bright poster. They can be many things. They're even playing with their dog or talking with people on the phone. Then promoter phase, incidents. What is incidents? This is a lot of excitement in a short period of time. It can be a tip on the stock market, investing in crypto, poker night with the boys, skydiving, bungee jumping, etc. And from a work point of view, they like to structure their time for short periods of great intensity versus a 9-to-5 routine. So now that we've been through this, tell me, where do you recognize yourself more? And I will get back to the needs. So where do you think you are as a phase? What needs speak to you more? Imaginer, persister, thinker, promoter, persister, thinker, harmonizer. Yeah. There can be an explanation to why you feel more psychological needs, Emma. Yeah. Thinker or persister. Yeah. Thinker, persister, harmonizer. Okay. Persister. Great. It's good that you managed to situate yourself. That was the whole point. Great. Okay, so what now? Well, it's simple. If we observe the behaviors, we can recognize what is the phase. Yeah, we don't even, in this slide, I just kept it simple. I don't even need to know what is the personality type. If we look at the behaviors under stress, we know what psychological needs need to be met. Yeah, so if somebody over control, this is the thinker phase. Over controlling meaning, yeah, micromanagement, etc. So it means that recognition of work and time structure, I need to cover those needs in myself or in the other person, depends who expresses these behaviors. If somebody pushes beliefs, I need to cover recognition of work and convictions. If somebody starts to make silly mistakes that they normally wouldn't do, I need to recognize that person for the being, for the person, yeah, not necessarily for the work, and cover sensory needs if I can. If somebody withdraws and passively await, feeling that they need more directions, I need to give them a time and space for themselves, yeah, solitude. If they start to blame others, I need to offer them playful contact. And if they manipulate, I need to offer them incidents. Yeah, so a lot of exciting. I need a challenge, something exciting for them to do. Okay, so to help you navigate easier through this, I will offer 2 examples. And one of them is from the professional area and one of them from the personal one, because this is useful in both areas. So let me start with the example from the work environment, the over-controlling manager or the micromanagement manager. Let's name our protagonist, Anna. Anna is my direct report and she's a team leader. She has periods of time when she starts to over-control everyone and wants to know in every little detail what they are doing, by when, what's the budget, who is involved, etc. And some of the projects in her department, she wouldn't even delegate to her direct reports because she can do it better and faster than anyone. Also, if Anna would decide to delegate a task or a project, most of the time she would impose her own way of doing things on her team. This lack of empowerment, of freedom, of the possibility to learn from their mistakes if needed, can really be demotivating for her direct reports. And they can feel like first graders, not like people with several years of experience. And of course, this can be fine if they are really new in their job and they don't know how to do things. But yeah, this is not really good when people have experience and they want to grow in their roles. So let's apply what we've learned today. Because she's not delegating and she's over controlling, if we look at the previous table, yeah, so at this one, over controlling, I see that her need is recognition of work and time structure. Yeah, is the first line, first row there. Yeah, so coming back here. So consequently, I will offer her positive recognition, if I can daily, but at least once, twice a week, for something she has done well that day or that week, and thank her for meeting the deadlines, yeah, because she kept the structure, the time structure, while also keeping the quality of work. And I would also try weekly to have a meeting or send her an email with a clear schedule of the upcoming deadlines and ask her also for her thoughts on some of the potential solutions to any of the issues we encounter. Because like that, I would meet her need of knowing what is to be done by when, yeah, the time structure, but I will also make use of her strengths, yeah, because she's logical, analytical, good organization skills. Also, I would make her aware of her psychological needs and would recommend her to have a discussion with her team to see how they can devise a working agreement that will take care of her time structure needs, especially. So in a way, to find a way to be informed regularly of the progress of the task, but without becoming suffocating for her team. And by having her batteries filled will make her change her behaviors and become more positive and constructive in relation to her direct report and to other stakeholders. Yeah, so this was the example from the professional sphere. I will continue actually with an example, a personal one. And if the previous one was a combination of various managers and direct reports that I have met in the past, this is the real example of my partner, Frank. He knows that I use his example in this webinar, and he's okay with that. He was my first PCM trainee when I got certified as a trainer, so he has learned a lot about the model, and we can really see how this model has made our relationship better and stronger. So when under stress, Frank preaches a lot. He's persister phase. And by a lot, I mean several times a day, every day. And it has a lot to do with the fact that he feels undervalued and underpaid in his current job as a data engineer. And he has done a PhD and postdoc at Imperial College London in a relevant subject. But when he got his job in the industry, they considered his PhD and postdoc experience to be equivalent with attending classes. So they didn't actually took into account the fact that he had a lot of project management, coding, and experience, and he worked with companies such as McLaren, who actually implemented his PhD results for better car building. Long story short, he constantly complains and preaches about how he's being judged by less educated people who don't have a PhD and who many times don't even understand the depth of his technical knowledge. While listening to his preaching once or twice would be fine for almost anyone, listening to it several times a day, daily, for months, it can really take a toll on somebody's energy levels. But because I know the model, I know that if he preaches and focuses on the negative, this is another thing they do under stress, the persisters, they focus on negative, then he has two needs that need to be met: recognition of work and recognition of convictions, yeah, for the persister phase. And while me, myself, I cannot really offer him much recognition for work, though I always recognize the little things he does in the house, I can recognize his convictions and beliefs. And even if I may not agree 100% with what he says, I can at least say, I understand your point of view. I know where you're coming from, and to listen. So this is what I can do. I cannot take care of the other need. So at times we might know what people need, but don't actually have a power to do something about it, but at least I can do some little things, and that calms him, and that at least gives him a bit of energy and charges a bit his batteries. Of course, the company has a lot of power to recognize his work, but that is not happening at this time. I cannot do anything, but at least we are aware. We know why he behaves like that under stress, and we can try to cover to meet those needs that we can meet. So I hope these examples will be useful for you. What I can say is, by using the examples and what you already now know about your personality, you'll know what the psychological needs are, those that are the most important for you. So what I would recommend you to do: observe yourselves. Yeah, which failure mechanism do you recognize most and you experience most? And from the 8 triggers, from the psychological needs, what are your most important? Become aware when you enter distress, because the elephant is very strong, but that is not really an excuse, not all the time, now that we know more. And consciously start to feed your psychological needs to charge your batteries, and then repeat, because I'm sure we have chances to get stressed many times a day. So this is a continuous work, but try and see how it works. And what I could recommend, on my blog, I wrote and I gave a bit more examples about this. It's called Motivation and Distress, the blog post. So you can also search that. It has a bit more examples and a bit more behaviors under stress. So that might also be useful for you.
Normally, if we were in a room together, we'd give you a big round of applause, Magda. But we really appreciate your time and your enthusiasm and your passion for this, and an absolutely fascinating evening, and amazing what you were able to pack into just over an hour. So thank you very much indeed. And you're getting a little virtual round of applause from Leslie there. So yeah.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you again for the invitation, Jackie. I might be tired at this hour, and sometimes my pronunciation was not the best, but this is a passion for me, and I'm really glad that you found it useful. And if there are 1 or 2 things that you can apply in your day-to-day life after this evening, I'm happy. And thank you for spending your evening with me.